everyone. Welcome to Got Beef at the morning show. This is first book review, Slaughterhouse Five. We got Alec here, Danny Merck, and Vejas Jeffsky. And so we all read up to chapter 4, and I'll let Alec start.
So this book is by Kurt Vonnegut. Vonnegut.
Yeah. He's a very famous author.
Yeah. I've never read anything by him before, and he has a very unique style of writing, in my opinion.
Yeah, he starts off the book by just basically narrating like himself, and it doesn't really have anything to do with
like he
the main story.
really switches out from first person and then third person perspective.
So at the beginning of chapter 1, the author really goes in depth about the main character's life. He's visited the New York Fair. He's against massacre, and
he has so the first chapter he has 2 little kids, and he goes to see. Yeah, he's a war veteran, and he wants to write a book about Dresden, which is the city that he visited during the war, World War II. And he saw a bunch of crazy stuff there, and he wants to write a book about it, but he doesn't actually remember enough things to write a book about it. So he goes and sees his friend, O'Hare, and he goes to their house with his 2 little kids, and he sits down at the dinner table, and then O'Hare's wife gets really mad at him because she hates war. So he decides to make an anti-war novel, and then he goes and he teaches for 2 years.
Also, I noticed that he uses a lot of repetition in the novel, and like he'll repeat certain information or paragraphs, sort of to reaffirm it, but then he'll go off into a different.
It's also to add effect. It's also just to add effect, I think. And he's really casual. He's really casual when he writes, and I think he writes more like as if he was talking to you, like he would say, "Hey, Hugh, you alright?" Like he's talking to a person, like as if he was just saying it out loud.
Yeah.
I kind of like it.
He's not too formal or anything.
No, not at all.
Slack, but it's good.
they also mentioned the main character is supposed to fly to Boston at some point, but there are flight problems. This can potentially change the whole course of the story, or how events were supposed to.
It's in chapter 2, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Chapter 2, beginning of chapter 2. So Vejas, you want to give us a chapter 3 summary? You recall from that chapter?
Okay. Well, he's talking about his war memories. He's going off about, like, he's walking in the snow with these 2 or 3 other people. And,
Soldiers?
Yeah, they're soldiers. And they're trying to avoid the Germans. And, like, it's just talking about how hard it was for him. And he's really, they sort of go off into their own worlds, sort of. But and then he starts like time traveling during that time.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of almost like he's like almost dying, and I guess
yeah.
But except it's not flashbacks to his past; it's flashbacks. It's like to his future.
I really liked how he described the Tralfamadores, or whatever he called them.
Yeah, they talk a good bit about that.
The Tralfamadores, and I think it's really cool. The way I think of them is like this little Oompa Loompa thing with sort of like a hand like this with an eye in the middle and then just 2 legs. I didn't really picture him with any arms and green or something.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool they see in the 4th dimension. That interests me, I guess.
So, his writing style and his sentence form is, as we said before, it's pretty cool how he's really slack with how he writes. Like, he's not trying to be formal or anything. It's more
he's almost writing in like the second person. I find how he says Billy set him up in business. Billy's son Robert had a lot of trouble in high school.
But like he's Billy.
Exactly.
So he's like talking about himself.
He switches.
Yeah, and he switches in between.
He's almost
when he's in the future, like now, then he talks about himself, but then in the past he says Billy, which is third person.
It's not very traditional.
I think maybe he was trying to add like more dimension.
Yeah.
And his sentence form, it's cool. You know, it's not really anything out of the ordinary. It's just like any normal novel, and that's cool. He doesn't use that many cliches either. Like, I don't know, I didn't notice any, so I guess that's a good thing.
In chapter 2, while on the battlefield, the author kind of sidetracks. The characters start talking about trench knives and different guns. So it like the story becomes a little bit off topic, but it's good to add that to a book sometimes.
And it seems like some of the characters sort of have these morbid fascinations with, like when they're describing the weapons and stuff.
And massacres and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
there's
Kinda
sort
sick in the head.
of like a morbid undertone to the writing.
Yeah, for sure.
You can tell he doesn't really like war. You know?
Yeah, like you can tell that he's sort of, it makes him uncomfortable.
What I loved was it's like a long paragraph. I don't know where it is in your books, but on page 49 in my version, he says, Billy was working on his second letter when the first letter was published. The second letter started out like this, and then he goes on to describe about how the Tralfamadorians, what they think death is, and how really everything is already sort of predetermined, and that that once you're dead, it's just sort of like a bad part in your life. You're just sort of, it's not the best. You're going through a hard time, and everything has just sort of already happened. Everything's already existing. It's sort of like what Mr. Killing tells us every single
sense
class.
of time.
Exactly, and that it says that it is just an illusion that we have here on Earth. That one moment follows another one, like beads on a string, and that once a moment is gone, it is gone forever. I don't know, that's pretty deep. It's really, really cool.
Yeah.
It just reaffirmed like everything that Mr. Kelly says.
So the main character is not Catholic, and his father had no religion.
Where's that?
And in my version, it's on page 38.
What chapter is that?
Chapter 2. Yeah, I believe it's chapter 2.
You're talking about Billy?
Yes, Billy Pilgrim.
So yeah, he's a pretty normal guy. And at the beginning of chapter 3, this is when kind of, like the time traveling really kind of kicks in. And he starts off like as a prisoner of war. I guess he was in the American army, and he's a prisoner of war to Germans.
Yeah.
And he's walking around, and it doesn't really say that the Germans are bad people yet. Like, it's not like he's describing them as monsters or anything. Like in some pro-war novels, they're just other soldiers, and he's their prisoner. So he goes around, and he gets in his trouble with with an obscene photograph and all that. And then he falls asleep, and then he wakes up in 1967. So then he kind of shoots through time, like 20 years ahead. And then he's like a doctor, and he's basically a doctor for eyes, and he administrates somebody, and then he falls back asleep, and then he goes back in time to being a prisoner of war. So that's kind of cool how part of the story is described.
Yeah. And just another thing that is sort of struck me was how because he had really good fortune after the war, right? He became an optometrist, and it just seemed like sort of interesting because it's sort of eccentric, you know. He just decided to become an optometrist afterwards,
Yeah.
and
Like, not all the soldiers are becoming optometrists, that's for sure.
yeah, and it's just sort of like the town, like Ilium, and it seems like it has this weird feeling of just sort of
Where does it say Ilium
random.
is?
Like,
Is
where
it
do they
in New York
describe it?
City?
I think so, yeah. I think he lives
No.
in
No, he moves to New York City
Okay.
Well,
to
New
go on
York.
on the radio program, and then that's where he talks about the Tralfamadorians.
Yeah.
Where did they say Ilium was? I don't remember.
So, yeah.
And how everyone dies in the plane crash. The plane, basically, Billy and he takes a group of optometrists from Ilium, and like his son-in-law and a bunch of the other well-known optometrists in the area, and basically he flies them all on a jet, I guess, or a plane to Montreal, actually, for a famous optometrist conference, and then the plane crashes in Vermont, and everyone dies except for him.
That's
Yeah.
kind of weird.
And then
Everyone dies
it's
except
weird
for
how
It's kind of intense how he keeps
he
on...
survives, and then his wife dies while he's recovering.
Exactly, and then as he's recovering, his wife dies from carbon monoxide
Yeah.
poisoning.
Yeah.
So
That
it
sucks.
is.
So he's got a
it
really
does- yeah.
perturbing
It's
life,
really
you know.
morbid.
Yeah.
It's
Like, oh, I
almost
should go to
like,
Montreal, and then everybody he knows on the plane dies in a plane crash.
It's almost like dark humor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, his sense of humor is not the
Not the uplifting.
not the most happy fun time.
Yeah.
I agree.
So the beginning of chapter 4 is
We're not
actually
there. We're not there.
We're not there. We didn't.
We're not there. Chapter 4.
So, chapter 3. So Vejas, you want to talk about chapter 3 a bit?
I think I sort of exhausted the subject, actually.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't want to go off into...
I noticed here at some point he said on in my version it's on page 56, so that's I believe it's chapter 3. He says he's talking to the doctor and he says some disease in my eyes. Is this the main character that has some
Wait,
disease
sorry,
in his
go
eyes?
Oh, no,
So-
he just needs glasses.
Oh, okay.
She doesn't have perfect vision.
What was
Yeah,
it?
but I guess at that time there was no.
Did you say that Billy was the guy who cracked his skull?
No, Billy isn't.
Pretty sure Billy's okay.
Who was the guy who
Billy's
cracked
saying
his skull?
somebody cracked his skull.
Oh, somebody else cracked.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind that.
Yeah, so Billy, near the end of chapter 3, after a meeting, he goes home, and he lies down for a nap, and actually starts crying, like bawling his eyes out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of weird, and he has a special bed that helps him fall asleep, which is cool. And then so he spends the time there at his house, and he actually at the end there he gets on a train, and the train stops working. And then out of the blue, nobody's really expecting it, he's kidnapped by Tralfamadorians.
Yeah.
And the chapter just ends there.
And the chapter just ends right there. Tralfamadorians. What are those?
It's
Where do
kind-
they come from?
That's chapter
The
3,
author
right?
the author
Chapter
ends
3, yeah, sorry.
the author ends that chapter with a little bit of a cliffhanger that
Look
way.
at it, yeah. So he is nobody has any what is he Tralfamadorians? Nobody ever mentioned them before. What do they have to do with
But
anything?
also that could just be like he's already lived this moment, and maybe he's just reliving this moment, and that he probably already knew that he was going to get captured by the Tralfamadorians. That's what I'm predicting.
Yeah, but the reader has no idea it's going to happen or
Yeah.
anything. So that's kind of cool.
Except that he's probably going to be displayed naked in a zoo and mated with the former Earthling movie star Montana Wildhat.
Yeah, so that's special.
That kind of came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they're sort of just they think of him as like an animal. But it says before that the Tralfamadorians, they pity the Earthlings because they can only see in the third dimension,
Yeah.
and so I guess they think of us sort of like animals. As
Which
like-
would be
inferior
like-
beings, you know.
It would be like the opposite.
Exactly, so that's why they say that they display him naked in a zoo, and
Yeah.
that they made him with a former movie star.
Yeah, and like throughout the book, especially in chapter 3, when a bunch of crazy stuff starts happening, well, the really crazy stuff, at least, you got to think that Billy has, like, you almost think that he's not all there in the head because of like the thoughts he has. They're really weird, and like how the events happen and everything happens so quickly. Like, you don't really think this would happen to a normal person, like getting captured and being in a plane crash and all this stuff. Like,
It's kind of crazy.
it's really
Yeah.
crazy. Exactly.
And also, like, he doesn't have the ability to control his time traveling. So, and then, he suffers from, like, sleep disorders because that's why he has a special bed and stuff. And so it's quite obvious that he has probably PTSD, since those are, like, symptoms of mental illness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
He
he
also-
might,
Something scarred him.
like, I mean, obviously the war had an effect on him.
Yeah, it does also say that he had like a nervous breakdown. And that he
Exactly.
went to I'm not going to say it's an asylum, but it's like a war veteran,
Exactly.
I guess, shell shock.
I think the
Treatment
book is
center.
also
Yeah, treatment
trying
center.
to perhaps bring light upon like how PTSD is experienced by a lot of soldiers.
And yeah,
For
especially
sure, yeah.
since when he wrote it all the way back then, it was just like,
Yeah, and
you're
exactly,
crazy.
it wasn't.
Like,
People just thought you
Come
were
back from the
crazy,
war and-
but
yeah.
it was actually mental
exactly. And, like, I read something
trauma.
about the guy who came back from the Vietnam War, actually. And this happened to a few people. This is a teeny bit off topic, but it does have to do it because of post-traumatic stress disorder. And he actually, like, murdered his wife
Yeah.
while he was sleeping. And he didn't even remember doing it. And he woke up and he went to see his wife, and his wife was dead, and he was like, what happened here? And
Who
it
was
turns
that
out
from?
he murdered his wife. And he had no recollection because he just, like, went back into the war, and then his head was in the war state.
Yeah.
So he just went around killing everything, fell back asleep, woke up, and then he was back to normal.
Yeah.
So that's, you can tell that war does things to you, you know?
Yeah.
You're not the same person.
With that.
So Billy, he writes a prayer and puts it on the wall.
What chapter is that, sir?
Chapter 3,
Okay.
near the
Right at
beginning.
yeah.
So a lot of the patients seem to appreciate this prayer, and it's just hanging on the wall, and I don't know, it's something for the patients to look at.
That's why he's an optometrist, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, in the first chapter, he talks about the taxi cab rider. And then he talks about how he really liked how the taxi cab driver, they wrote him a postcard, and at the end he wrote, "If the accident will."
Yeah.
So it's, and because in the sense it says we'll meet again in a world of peace and freedom in the taxi cab if the accident will. So I don't know, maybe that's foreshadowing something.
Probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like, it's only chapter 3, and there's already been a lot of things that happen. Like, compared to other books, you have all this build-up, and then blah, 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 but bang, end of chapter 3, getting kidnapped by aliens, and he's already recollected a bunch of parts in the war, which is pretty cool.
Oh yeah. Also, okay. Oh, I read a bit ahead. So
Okay. Well, we'll not talk about that
we
just
won't talk about that.
Yeah, and also, like, during chapter 3, when Billy is an optometrist, obviously the sections of when he's an optometrist, you can tell that, like, well, we talked about it a bit before, he's really, really lucky, actually, because, like, after coming back from the war and everything, and obviously he's scarred a bit mentally, but everything else seems okay. He doesn't have any physical disorders or anything like that. And he has a nice big house, and he has steady investments and all that, and he's doing just fine. But obviously, something's wrong with his head, and we don't know exactly what it is yet. Like, obviously, he's doing some weird stuff, but we don't know exactly, like, what caused it. Obviously, the war, but details.
I'm sure the author will definitely
Clear
mention
that
that.
up. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Also, I learned some, I don't know about you guys, but I learned some cool stuff about the war in the first chapter, especially just how they said that at the end of the war, the Russians and the Americans, they wanted to do sort of like a prisoner exchange, and they did like a man for a man thing. I don't know if I didn't read it right or I didn't really understand it, but I pictured it like there's Americans on one side, there's Russians on another side, and that the Americans have all the Russian prisoners of war, and the Russians have all the American prisoners of war, and that they're trading. But I thought they're swapping one for one, but I thought they were alliance, so I don't really know why they're doing that when they could just give everyone their prisoners back
For free.
For free, but
True.
just
Well, because, like, sure, they were both against the Germans, but, and, you know, like, the Cold War and everything.
I thought they formed an alliance, though.
Well, they weren't, it's like common enemy. It's not like they were really, like, sure, they were fighting the same guy, but they weren't really happy
Like, it's
with
kind of,
each
we
other.
have to work together,
Exactly.
you know.
It's like,
Yeah.
if Germany's going to invade both of them, obviously they're both going to fight back.
Yeah, I guess.
And it doesn't mean they have the same ideals, but it means that they're both common enemy. And maybe we should just, before ending it here, we should talk about what we think is going to happen in the rest of the book. Obviously, Vejas, you read ahead of it?
Yeah.
So, no
there's-
spoilers, but
There's obviously more time traveling, I bet.
Yeah, it's a big
And
part.
it'll probably just go more in depth into what happened
I
to
really
Billy that causes him specifically that kind of trauma. So
I hope
probably
that-
still
yeah.
get pretty grabbed.
I don't know, but I'm hoping that it's going to go into stuff like war stories or whatever, and also I think the Tralfamadorian thing especially is really cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Like,
that
I hope they
develop.
go into talk about their society or how they live or something. I don't know.
I mean, at the end of chapter 3, you can definitely feel some rising action here, and that one thing is just gonna lead to another in the story.
yeah, like the Tralfamadorians. Now
Yeah,
these
building
aliens,
tension,
these
exactly.
aliens are introduced, and like what's going to happen with that? I don't know. I think maybe speculation. Maybe he's going to get captured. They're going to do something to his brain,
Yeah,
And
they
then-
might
yeah.
do like neuro
some tests or something. And we don't know if he's the first person they've captured, or if they've been doing this for millions of years, and if they've been surveying the world or something. But obviously, it's
Or
not known
perhaps,
better than
or perhaps we find out that the Tralfamadorians are just this, like it's all made up in his mind. And,
Yeah, that too.
And that, like, he has some.
disorder or something.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like an alternate
It's crazy.
reality that he's created for himself.
Because of all the things he's been doing so far, you never
Yeah,
know.
it's like a way to escape
Exactly.
their reality.
He's on some
Yeah.
Playing video games.
heavy crack or something.
Yeah, maybe he's just crazy, or maybe he's not crazy, and it's just a coincidence that it happened to him. Because he did survive a plane crash.
Yeah.
So you never know.
So I
Oh,
guess
yeah.
that's it.
All right then.
Yeah. So thanks for watching.
This has got beef.
This is Got Beef's morning show review number 1, chapters 1 to 3 for Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. And I'll see you
next
guys
time.
later.